James Bond 007 Nightfire is a first-person shooter developed by Eurocom, published by EA, and released on the PS2, Xbox and Gamecube in November of 2002. The game is a sequel to Agent Under Fire, which was released 1 year earlier, and during its release it was received quite well by critics and saw commercial success, as the game sold 300,000 copies in the UK alone. Nightfire's story begins with James Bond, who looks like Pierce Brosnan but is actually voiced by Maxwell Caulfield, lending a hand to a French intelligence operative by hanging out of a helicopter with a sniper rifle and taking down enemies pursuing her through the streets of Paris, as they both need to defuse a bomb before the New Year's celebration. It is at this point where you realise that we're off to a pretty good start. The plot initially centres around Bond investigating a shady industrialist by the name of Raphael Drake, whose organisation wants to get rid of the world's nukes and anything else harmful to the environment. It is soon revealed that they have much more sinister plans of global domination, allowing them to shape the world as they see fit. So, you know, every James Bond story ever. Now, while the story is fairly cliched and some of the writing is cringeworthy beyond belief, it's all very tongue-in-cheek and for the most part is very forgivable. If you're a fan of the franchise, then it's kind of what you're here for anyway, but overall the story plays out mostly as you'd expect, but that doesn't really make it any less enjoyable. Nightfire is primarily an FPS with a few missions that take place in the famous Aston Martin and other vehicles. The game features 12 brief missions that mostly see Bond running and gunning with whichever weapon you can find, or sneaking through areas with a silenced pistol. The controls feel like a console shooter that was being developed before Halo came along and standardised a lot of mechanics, and while this isn't a bad thing, it definitely takes a mission or two to acclimatise. Taking on enemies isn't a huge challenge, as there is a slight bit of auto-aim going on here, and it does make targeting much easier, but it's clear that the developers wanted to just keep you moving, and in my opinion this was a very wise choice. You are not an unstoppable force, but the game doesn't leave you feeling incompetent either, and if you're looking for a more realistic experience you can just turn all of the assistance off in the settings anyway. Making your way through the wide variety of environments and taking on the army of henchmen is a lot of fun. While the enemy's AI could be better, you are still required to take cover and be precise with your shots, as body armour and ammo are both scarce. Sneaking isn't as fun as you'd like it to be, as there isn't really any way to judge how close you can get to an enemy or how loud you can be before they are alerted. Stealth is completely optional, so this isn't an issue, but it would have been nice to sneak around with some amount of confidence. Nightfire is mostly about the action anyway. There are a number of unavoidable but fun shootouts where the game clearly wants you to just unload everything you have while sprinting through an area, and there are also quite a few moments where it seems like everything is just blowing up. If there is one word that comes to mind when I think about this game, it is variety. Within the first 3 missions I had already sniped enemies from a helicopter, stormed a castle, infiltrated a secret party, operated a turret on a snowmobile, and raced around in an Aston Martin. This game seems like a bunch of developers got together in a room, brainstormed a bunch of cool scenarios for Bond, and then afterwards figured out a narrative that could connect all of them. And that's what makes this game so much fun. It doesn't let you settle or get bored with doing one thing because it moves at such a fast pace that you just keep playing because you want to see what mad thing is going to happen next. There are some gripes I have with this title. Its checkpoints can be a little harsh, its lighting in missions during nighttime can leave you wandering around in the dark, and the lack of a weapon wheel can be annoying as you have to cycle through all of your items to choose the weapon you want. However, none of these things get in the way that much, you're not left frustrated due to the game's assisted controls, and you basically feel like you're taking part in an action movie. For a game released in 2002, I was actually surprised how well the game looks in places. While Pierce Brosnan doesn't sound like Pierce Brosnan, he sure does look just like Pierce Brosnan. Between and during missions there are a number of in-engine and pre-rendered cutscenes which are both animated and directed very well. Some characters look a little robotic from the neck down, but their faces move in a surprisingly realistic way, which does go a long way in pulling you into the story just that little bit more. Environments have enough detail to them to make them feel more than just corridors and open spaces to shoot people in. Weapons are modelled pretty well too, and overall I have to say that while Nightfire is 16 years old, it's not one of those games where you immediately realise that as soon as you put the disc in. Voice acting is kind of hard to judge as it's over the top and cheesy, but at the same time it's a James Bond game, so I'm not sure if I can call that poor writing or just appropriate for the franchise. Nevertheless, lines are delivered well.
I promise you, Drake will pay.
Kiko, you're not safe here. Come with me.
The game also gets some good use out of the famous 007 theme song, and the score created for the game feels in line with the movies, so no real complaints there. When I put the Nightfire disc into my PS2, I was fully expecting a mediocre corridor shooter, and what I got instead was a surprisingly fun and visually impressive game that offered enough variety to keep me thoroughly interested. In some places the game does show its age and has a bit of a learning curve with its unorthodox control scheme, but at the end of the day it does exactly what it says on the tin and plays like a James Bond movie. If you're a fan of the franchise, then I'd say this is a must play, but even if you're not, the guns, the cars, the gadgets all wrap up into a great little package that can be picked up for next to nothing nowadays and will keep you very much entertained for at least a weekend.